Critics say the once lauded, now derided United Nations Human Rights Commission is a human rights violation on its own. But how would you revamp this 53-nation group? Welcome to Diplomatic License. I'm Richard Roth. The UN overall agrees some form of change is needed. One example where the dispute rages is Zimbabwe. Many UN members say the nation is violating its own citizens' human rights. But the African nation thinks these are distortions, overplaying civil rights while downplaying economic, social, and cultural rights.
The whole human rights agenda, instead of being a cooperative exercise, has degenerated into a Western-managed kangaroo court, always looking out for criminals, as they call them, among developing countries.
Zimbabwe currently is a member of the UN Human Rights Commission, something the U.S. points to as a reason the UN is in need of reform. We're pleased to welcome here in the studio Zimbabwe's United Nations Ambassador, Boniface Chidgausiku, and also with us Hillel Neuer, the director of a group called UN Watch, a Geneva-based NGO that watches the UN. Hillel, what's the latest on the fight for a new human rights commission? What's really going on behind closed doors?
Well, Richard, the world needs a credible UN body that will be a voice for victims of human rights violations, that will make a difference for women subjected to inequality and violence, to victims of state repression, censorship, torture. And Kofi Annan has said the Human Rights Commission has failed. Now is our chance to reshape it into a new council that will be that voice.
Now, Zimbabwe is on the current Human Rights Commission. Is that acceptable to your organization?
No, it's abysmal. Composition of the new council is the main critical element. And we need to support Kofi Annan, who said that we need members who have a, quote, solid record of commitment to the highest human rights standards. Now, until now, and he said it, we've had politicization, selectivity, countries joining not to promote human rights, but to shield their own records of abuse. Zimbabwe is one of those countries.
Ambassador Chidgausiku, thank you for coming here, not just to talk about your country, but the whole commission. But while we're talking about Zimbabwe, what's your response?
Well, Zimbabwe, in terms of its human rights record, I don't think is an exception in terms of observing human rights. You have countries like the United States, who have been on the Human Rights Commission for a long time. They have a solid record on human rights, and nobody talks about it. And we wonder, why is Zimbabwe? Why not the United States? We don't have any detainees in Guantanamo Bay. Why is that not an issue in terms of human rights?
Zimbabwe and other countries, do they feel that the United States is putting undue pressure on the UN to create these reforms so that the organization follows Washington's commands?
The UN is an intergovernmental organization made up of 191 members. And the United States happens to be one of those 191 members. Whatever direction the UN will take will have to be determined by the member states, not by one member state.
The assertion that Zimbabwe is entitled to be on the Human Rights Commission is ridiculous. There are human rights violations everywhere. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Western nations should be scrutinized as well. But Zimbabwe is a place where there's been destruction of homes of 700,000 people, a country that was the breadbasket of Africa. There are now 4 million people who need food aid, suppression of journalists, closing down of newspapers, prosecuting opposition members, and the notion that that country is equal to every other country is sheer moral relativism, and the UN was founded on moral clarity.
When one looks at Zimbabwe...
And you can look at each other, by the way, while we're looking at Zimbabwe.
When one looks at the Zimbabwe, just go on the internet today and see what type of news that comes from Zimbabwe. We have independent newspapers that are operating in Zimbabwe. They report freely, and they're being prosecuted. You go on the internet today, you find the Independent, the Standard, the Financial Gazette.
That's not what journalists are saying. Independent human rights experts have confirmed that there's been enormous suppression of journalism, closure of newspapers. These are facts. And this is a place where NGOs are persecuted under law, do not have the right to freely associate. There are no fair elections. I mean, Zimbabwe's record is abysmal. And, you know, we just had a report by Human Rights Watch saying that the government is obstructing aid to the victims whose houses and livelihoods were destroyed. 700,000 people, they don't have shelter, they don't have food, they don't have sanitation.
Jan Eglin, the chief humanitarian man for the UN, got to go to Zimbabwe soon. Go ahead.
Sure. You know, if you make an analysis of a country based in Geneva, you're not on the ground. You get your information from news reports. People who are being paid to paint certain pictures and make that a factual report. That's not correct. At the present moment, we have Eglan going to Zimbabwe to go and see for himself, to see the 700,000 that you're talking about, whether they, in reality, they are not there. Even when Tibaijuka went to Zimbabwe, she did not even see those 700,000 people.
Tibaijuka is the UN Habitat Director, whose report was quite critical of your country.
But that figure, 700,000, it's a fiction.
Well,
it was Operation Restore Order, right? That's what it was called.
It's confirmed by every independent human rights organization, by the United Nations. And, you know, this attempt by Robert Mugabe to paint this as an imperial plot, which is a consistent theme, is ridiculous. Anna Tibaijuka, Kofi Annan's envoy, neither her nor Kofi Annan are part of any Western plot. Look, you know, the regimes say one thing, but the people in Zimbabwe say something else. And the NGOs from that region say that we want their governments to be held accountable.
What's wrong with countries being chosen for the new human rights panel based upon their records, and how do you determine?
Okay, our view, every member of the United Nations has a right to serve on any body of the United Nations. We don't want a replicate of a new Security Council or a club where few selected individuals with the resources can serve on that council and keep out people that are not seen as being friendly. This is our argument. We don't want a human rights council where other members of the United Nations who are members of an intergovernmental organization to be barred from that type of...
But you know that there's damage being done to the organization by countries that people accuse of human rights violations of sitting in judgment of others. True. It's not just Zimbabwe people are talking about.
Can we say, if we want to have certain qualifications for people who should sit on the Human Rights Council, can we say people who have used the nuclear, the atomic bomb on a country?
Yes. But that's a different situation. We're not facing...
we are saying, can we come up with qualifications? Where would we stop in qualifying members? Who will determine those qualifications?
So, Hillel, what is the solution? You're going to hear this inside the UN, 191 countries. Who gets to decide who's a violator and who gets to judge?
Richard, there is no magic solution, but let's recognize the facts and let's support Kofi Annan, who said that we've basically had the fox guarding the chickens, and it hasn't worked. We've had Cuba, we've had Libya as chair. We've had a situation where Sudan, which is committing mass rape, killings, displacement, affecting hundreds of thousands of people, is automatically re-elected on the commission.
Sudan's going to lead the African Union.
And where does it end? There is a way to draw the line. There is no automatic criteria. There are proposals. Some propose those countries under measures under Chapter 7 of the Charter be disqualified.
So what should Zimbabwe do to be worthy of sitting, in your view, on a new revamped commission?
Well, first of all, Zimbabwe's got to begin respecting the UN Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, from A to Z. Okay. But just you know, Richard,
we only have less than a minute.
The General Assembly members will have to be accountable for their votes. If they vote for a country, they're going to have to explain to the United Nations and to their population why they voted for a given country, and that country has to give forth a platform and if its commitment to human rights and what it's going to achieve.
The final word, Ambassador?
As a member of the United Nations, every member has a right to appear or to serve on the Human Rights Council. In terms of qualifications, there is no country that has, you know, a clean record which can say that, you know, which can sit in judgment. For example, how many people are dying in Iraq on a daily basis because of the United States? Why hasn't anybody queried why the United States is on the Human Rights Council today?
Every country can be scrutinized, but the notion that every country should sit in judgment on others has just failed. Kofi Annan said it's failed, and it's casting a shadow on the reputation of the UN as a whole.
The British government has just been trying to introduce repressive legislation in the United Kingdom, and even their record in Iraq. Why?
Every country should be scrutinized.
True,
every country should be scrutinized equally.
Then who should go there?
And your country should be forced to present what its commitment is to human rights and to defend its record and be accountable to somebody.
We agree. Everybody should be accountable, not just Zimbabwe, every country.
All right, now you're seeing why nobody expects an agreement by the end of this year, and we'll see what happens in the new year. Hillel Neuer of UN Watch, based in Geneva, thank you. And Ambassador Boniface Chigasiku of Zimbabwe, UN Ambassador. You were formerly posted in Angola, right? And in China, I think.
And in Geneva.
And Geneva. Well, you have something.
We missed each other.
You have something in common. I don't know how you missed each other. Thanks very much for debating here on Diplomatic License on human rights.